candidates has been cut in half. Former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg joined the race late, looking to catch the frontrunner. Former Vice President Joe Biden, Senators Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, and South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg. They're preparing for primary season as the Senate prepares for an impeachment trial in the new year. Natalie Brand, CBS News, Washington.
It hasn't just been a turbulent year in Washington, but a decade of political change. As we count down to 2020, Chief Washington correspondent Major Garrett looks back at the biggest political stories of the 2010s.
Article 2 is adopted.
President Donald Trump impeached. That's a mouthful all by itself, capping 10 years of political turbulence. The through line, even after a recovery for the record books, the fallout of the Great Recession has left Americans questioning their economic security and government's place in their lives.
Health insurance reform becomes law in the United States of America.
President Barack Obama's signature achievement, Obamacare, provided health care to millions. But it also gave rise to the Tea Party. Conservative backlash to Mr. Obama took down Nancy Pelosi, the first female Speaker of the House. Although Mr. Obama finally brought 9/11 mastermind Osama bin Laden to justice, he soon faced the lowest low of his presidency, the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting, 6 educators and 20 children dead.
Beautiful little kids between the ages of 5 and 10 years old.
Calls for gun control failed, and 3 years later, a white gunman prayed with 9 black parishioners in Charleston, South Carolina, then shot them dead. Grief yielded to anguished song.
Sing praise.
Protests led to the Black Lives Matter demonstrations that provided a background to the presidential election. The 2016 campaign was like no other in modern history. Loud, angry, divisive, and in its wake, wave after wave of disruption.
The fake news, they're all back there.
Donald Trump blistered the airwaves and social media,
Can't be so wrong.
knocking over experienced Republican rivals like bowling pins. Then,
You can do anything. Whatever you want. We haven't done it.
and yet, victory.
The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer.
President Trump has been every bit as disruptive as candidate Trump. His response to the investigation into Russian election interference fired the FBI director. Although Mr. Trump delivered a massive tax cut to Supreme Court justices and dozens of federal judges last year, an unsettled electorate handed the House back to the Democrats and the Speaker's gavel back to Nancy Pelosi. Despite her misgivings, the Ukraine scandal drove Pelosi to seek the president's removal.
It's a hoax. It's a big fat hoax.
Mr. Trump's legacy? A re-election answer looms in the first year of our new decade.
Coming up after a break, we'll take you live to New York City's Times Square as we count down to 2020. You're streaming CBSN, CBS News, always on. back to CBSN's special New Year's Eve coverage, Countdown to 2020. We are about a half hour away from midnight here on the East Coast. Hillary Lane is in Times Square. Hillary, what's the latest?
Elaine, you can feel the excitement here in Times Square growing as we inch closer and closer to 2020, and security here remains tight. Even though the NYPD says there is no credible threat to Times Square, there are still thousands of police officers on the ground, and for the first time, drones in the air. Everyone in Times Square has gone through multiple layers of security. There are over 1 million revelers getting ready to ring in the new year. Many have been on their feet for hours, some even since the early hours of the morning. We spoke to two sisters. They road tripped here together from Los Angeles. They said coming to watch the ball drop was something on their bucket list. They just had to do it. But they've been standing since 1 a.m. and they are ready for midnight to be here. They're ready to celebrate. Of course, the big star of the show is that Waterford ball that will drop at midnight. It's over 12,000 pounds, 12 feet wide, really signifying all of the celebration that we'll see here in Times Square in just a little while. And the NYPD says it takes about a year to plan out all of the security for an event like this. So as soon as that ball drops, they'll start planning for 2020. Live at the Marriott Marquis in Times Square, Hillary Lane. Elaine, back over to you.
As we count down to midnight, we're also looking back on the biggest stories of 2019. CBS News Chief Medical Correspondent Dr. John LaPook reports on the biggest health stories of the year, starting with a mysterious illness that impacted teens across the country.
More than 2,400 people were hospitalized with lung injuries in an ongoing outbreak associated with vaping in the U.S. More than 50 people died.
I didn't think it could be that bad, and it really almost killed me.
Linked the chemical vitamin E acetate to the outbreak, but say there might be more than one cause. More than 1,200 cases of measles were reported, the largest number since 1992. Most cases were linked to outbreaks in New York.
The outbreaks in New York are being fueled by myth and misinformation that is leading people to not get vaccinated.
2018-2019 flu season was the longest in a decade. Federal health officials say 2 types of viruses surfaced at different times, extending the season. An E. coli outbreak prompted a CDC warning on romaine lettuce from the Salinas, California region.
The E. coli can cause an intestinal illness. They're prominently diarrhea, but also abdominal cramps and just feeling very, very poorly.
The makers of Zantac recalled the popular heartburn drug. Generic versions were also pulled. The FDA is investigating after tests showed small amounts of a probable carcinogen. With more than 130 people dying every day in the U.S. from opioid overdoses, federal health officials announced more than the vaccine could prevent about 92% of cancers caused by the human papillomavirus. And research published in Pediatrics backed up the vaccine's safety. Dozens of cases of Eastern equine encephalitis, or triple E, were reported, making it the worst season since the CDC began monitoring for the mosquito-borne disease. 15 people died. The FDA approved the first drug for women with postpartum depression. The one-time intravenous treatment requires a 3-night hospital stay.
I noticed a huge difference. Those intrusive thoughts I told you about were gone, and they never came back.
The FDA advisory panel recommended the first treatment for food allergies. Research shows the oral immunotherapy helps 67% of children and teens with severe food allergies tolerate the equivalent of about 2 years.
So
And
you
the
got
FDA
nothing.
issued their strongest warning on some popular sleep medications,
Oh, do I really want to try?
requiring
Yes,
a black
I do.
box label on medications including Ambien, Lunesta, and Sonata to alert patients to potentially dangerous behaviors. That's a look at the year's top health stories. Dr. John LaPook, CBS News.
2019 gave us record-breaking box office numbers, along with a few celebrity scandals. Here is Chris Martinez with a look at some of the top entertainment stories.
Yeah,
2019 saw celebrities entangled in
live.
a college admissions scandal.
Or somebody was live when you took one.
Felicity Huffman were
At least
among
I'm
the
mine.
parents
It's
charged with committing bribery and fraud to get their kids admitted to top universities. Huffman pled guilty and spent nearly 2 weeks in prison.
Robert.
Kelly spent much of the time after a lifetime documentary called Surviving R. Kelly led to a number of charges of criminal sexual abuse against the singer. And Empire star Jussie Smollett was charged with filing a false police report after investigators said he lied about a hate crime assault.
The charges were later dismissed. Fans mourned the loss of several celebrities in 2019, including rapper Nipsey Hussle, who was murdered outside a clothing shop he owned in Los Angeles. 90210 star Luke Perry passed away after suffering a stroke, and trailblazing actress Diane Carroll succumbed to complications from breast cancer at age 84.
What is survival of the fittest?
You are right. On TV, fans cheered as James Holzhauer won over $2 million in an epic 32-game winning streak on Jeopardy! The nation also learned the show's beloved host, Alex Trebek, was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. At the box office, several films shattered records. Marvel Studios' Avengers Endgame dethroned Avatar to become the highest-grossing film of all time.
We do this together, okay?
Audiences warmly welcomed Disney's Frozen 2, giving it the biggest opening of all time for an animated film. And controversy over its violent content didn't stop moviegoers from making Joker the highest-grossing R-rated movie ever. At the Oscars, Green Book took home Best Picture. Casey Musgrave's Golden Hour took home the Grammy for Album of the Year, while Apple Music named Billie Eilish 2019's Global Artist of the Year. And Game of Thrones, which wrapped up its final season, took home the Emmy for Outstanding Drama Series. That's your year in entertainment. Chris Martinez, CBS News, Los Angeles.
From rising tensions to the prospect of peace, it's been a defining decade in Asia. Barry Peterson takes a look back.
Here in the Far East, the story of this decade is the story of two men who define not just the region, but a growing and strengthening challenge to the United States. First, China's President Xi Jinping. His big spending on the military included deploying just this month the very first Chinese-built aircraft carrier, a bid to confront the U.S. for control of the region. Closer to home, he has not been able to control this year's pro-democracy riots in Hong Kong. Once the jewel of Asia, the city is now better known for tear gas and street violence with no end in sight. Asia's other strongman, North Korea's Kim Jong-un, took power when his father died in 2011. The faces of his family dynasty are everywhere. To solidify his power, Kim is making life better for an emerging middle class. Department stores have goods. And Pyongyang has a new amusement park.
Rocket Man.
Even President Trump's name-calling seems to have raised Kim's status.
Rocket Man should have been handled a long time ago.
Two nuclear summits followed,
My friend.
as did a remarkable photo op when Trump became the first sitting American president to step into North Korea.
Stepping across that line was a great honor. A lot of progress has been made.
But months after that photo op, economic sanctions are still in place, and Kim just told his generals to accelerate military development. That could mean new nuclear weapons or ballistic missile tests. This decade began with a nuclear horror, explosions at a Japanese nuclear power plant after flooding from an earthquake-triggered tsunami. It ends under a different sort of nuclear cloud that threatens the United States and the world.
We're going to take a quick break, but before we go, Spotify looked at the top music you streamed this year and throughout the decade.
Wherever we have to go.
We just rode along the coastline.
Whatever we have to do.
Flight police were one of the first rounds of tear gas.
Every evening we're focused.
This is the main highway to the hardest hit areas.
On finding and telling the truth.
How does that hamper or hurt our national security?
Even among the ashes, you can see the signs of deforestation.
And earning your trust.
You traveled the whole way with your son?
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell.
For over a century, people have flocked to New York City's Times Square to see its famous New Year's Eve celebration. The main attraction is the iconic ball, which first debuted in 1907. It's part of a centuries-old tradition, signaling the passage of time. The first ball was made of iron and wood and covered with 125-watt light bulbs. It weighed 700 pounds. Now it's made up of about 3,000 Waterford crystal triangles that are installed on an aluminum frame. It measures 12 feet in diameter and weighs nearly 12,000 pounds. It's not just the end of the year, but the beginning of a new decade. Let's take a look back at the legacy of the 2010s, a decade of political and technological change. Here's 5 journalists and experts on how they think the decade will be remembered.
The 2010s really was the decade where we flipped the table on the status quo.
Don't believe it, just watch.
A truly magical and revolutionary product today.
We can change the world.
We started this decade with Barack Obama. So help me God, so help me God. In many ways, where we're at started with Barack Obama because the American voters wanted something totally different. It just became more and more different throughout the decade.
We will make America great again.
When you look back to 2010, I don't know how you don't remember Donald Trump.
We are building a wall. He is a sick puppy.
He's the greatest show on earth, whether you like it or not. And 2010 was about reality TV shows.
I'm not buying a pair of shoes. I bought a career. I don't give a what I hear.
And he ended the decade with a reality TV show.
Get her out of here.
We started the decade with an economic crisis, and we finished it with an existential crisis. Everything that happened in the 2010s was rooted in this enormously disruptive and frightening collapse of the economy.
This was the Dow's worst one-day point drop. The Dow Jones average dropping 213 points.
It ripped apart a bunch of institutions and norms, and now we're kind of asking ourselves, what kind of a world do we want?
Stop the violence! Stop the rape!
The 2010s will be remembered as the decade when the Me Too movement It felt like all of a sudden this issue, which had a history of lack of accountability, suddenly had a new sense that there could be consequences for this kind of behavior.
Time is up. We are no longer going to be harassed.
I'm responsible for what happens here.
The moment that might have defined the arc of the 2010s attack, Mark Zuckerberg testifying after the Cambridge Analytica scandal.
It was my mistake. I'm sorry.
When we go from a moment of innovation,
Amazon,
Alexa, how's traffic?
Uber, Instagram, the real reckoning about the consequences of tech.
Stop apologizing and let's make a change.
Your user agreement sucks.
What's extraordinary about some of these hashtags is that they weren't just in name only. People actually marched. People went out into the streets. People protested, did walkouts.
I think about when I was first getting into politics when I was in my early teens, and I felt like as a young person, you're sort of meant to be patted on the head, and isn't this nice? And I feel like now there's really space.
The world is waking up, and change is coming, whether you like it or not.
And once again, history unfolds. The Emmy goes to Billy Porter.
This whole decade of transformation, especially in entertainment film, is that while we still have a very long way to go, there's so much that's promising.
Mahershala Ali became the first Muslim actor to win an Academy Award.
Catherine Bigelow, the
first woman to win Best Director.
Laverne Cox, the first openly transgender woman ever nominated for an acting Emmy.
From the knees. Couture.
I don't think that we can understate the impact of seeing some of these firsts coming in entertainment. You have Ava DuVernay running her own studio, headlining movies like Crazy Virginia. And then you've got Black Panther. It actually moved the needle on what it meant to have a predominantly Black cast in the Marvel universe. Hamilton is a breathtaking body of work.
What do you think you are? Gary Antoinette?
The decade in TV was just, explosive.
Because we can stream it whenever we want, we're able to sort of consume much more complex culture whenever we want on our own time. And it led to the creation of amazing television.
Obvious that is.
Nothing is about to happen until something happens.
Please risk.
My daddy, Alabama. Mama, Louisiana.
This was the decade that Queen Bee, Beyonce, ascended to her throne.
I ain't thinking about you.
When you think about the album Lemonade, for example, which was all about Black pride and self-worth, her performance at Coachella was so amazing that they renamed it Faychella. She ran away with the decade heads down.
That's down the right field line into the corner.
The sports moment of the decade absolutely has to be the Washington Nationals.
3-2.
I'm a huge national fan, so I'm a little bit biased, but it was just a great uplifting story at a time that America needed more than ever before. Terrible song, but a great rallying cry. You still can you do it for us now?
This is America.
I can't tell you what the 2020s will be defined by, but I can tell you this. We live in an era where it just feels like every bill is coming due at once. Huge debates about health care.
The Jones plan essentially retained the status quo.
It's not true.
It is exactly true.
About the environment, when I think basically nobody thinks that the system is really fair anymore. So it just feels like we're living not only through one reckoning, but a kind of cascade of reckonings.
I'm really excited about space exploration.
The future of space exploration is something really exciting to look forward to in the 2020s.
I really am kind of curious what's going to happen with that Tesla truck. I think it looks like something out of the Jetsons.
Well, here we go again. This is a great time to be alive. And the next decade is going to be crazy.
We got somebody watching.
It's almost midnight on the East Coast, so let's take you live now to New York City's Times Square as we await the ball drop. As we go ahead and listen in from all of us at CBS 10, thanks for watching. Have a happy New Year, and we'll see you in 2020.
I'm going to sign off. See y'all later.